So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Rich Clark, and I've been a hypnotherapist the last 9 years and a holistic therapist the last 15 years. So I'm going to talk about Valentine's Day because it's coming up on Friday the 14th. And I think it's 14th. I think it's for maybe Friday in the UK or Spain or Europe. However, I'm going to talk about some of the myths behind it, also the issues of commercialization and the pressures in relationships on Valentine's Day, or dating or single life and so forth. So I'm going to start with some of the historical origins of Valentine's Day. So the original roots of Valentine's Day traces back to ancient Rome and a festival called Lupercalia, and this was celebrated in mid-February. This fertility festival involved unique rituals, including a matchmaking lottery, people dressed up as wild animals, as goats and so forth, and also using the actual blood of this to whip each other with. And people used to culminate if they didn't end up in matchmaking, into mass orgies. Now, that sounds a very mad idea of what Valentine's Day was, but that was actually the actual origins of it. So the Christian church actually later adapted this celebration. Now, this actually happens in a lot of culture, that pagan ceremonies and Christian ceremonies or religious ceremonies come together. So the Christian church, what they did is they used, with Pope Gelasius I, established Valentine's Day in 496 CE. This holiday is then named after Saint Valentine. And though interestingly enough, there was multiple Christian martyrs called Valentine. So the most famous legend involves a priest who defied Emperor Claudius I, second's ban on a marriage. And this was for young soldiers secretly performing weddings for young lovers. Some people believed if they got married before they went to war, it gave them good luck, or if they died in battle, that their worth would be to their wives, because otherwise it would go dissipate or be taken by the actual, by the empire, the Roman Empire. So there's a lot of weird sort of connotations of what Valentine's Day is. The romantic association is associated and strengthened during the Middle Ages, and this was through the idea of the courtly of love. Now, the idea of the courtly of love is when we hear the word courting, that's where it comes from, because people used to live in these medieval, they used to live in these medieval like towers or castles or areas, or sort of like citadels. And then people used to come and meet when they wanted to date in the court. And that is where sometimes where the water fountain was, where fresh water was, where the market was. So this is where the idea of courting comes from. And that's why when you actually look around the world, you always see like water fountains. And there's a lot of association with romanticism, because the idea of water is about the flow, like fertility, which is obviously a symbolic idea of the idea of sperm and fertility making. So the idea of the first known Valentine's letter was actually written by Charles, the Duke of Orleans, and it was to his wife in the 1415 when he was imprisoned in the Tower of London. And he did this Valentine saying, "To my Valentines, I love you," all this, and because in the Tower of London, usually if you ended up there, you usually were going to be executed. So that's obviously the ancient ideas and so forth, but we're going to go talk about the modern cultural significance and what it is in contemporary society. So Valentine's Day offers several social functions. For couples, it's seen as a milestone celebration that can strengthen bonds through shared experiences and gift giving, right? It's very common for couples. For singles, it's become an opportunity to express interest in potential partners or celebrate self-love. In marriages, it can be seen as a dedicated time to prioritize romance amidst busy lives. Again, I don't think with marriage you should just do it for Valentine's Day to show your love. I think you should be doing it every so often as certain gestures or so forth. But again, some people struggle to do that. People don't always like to share everything. And for new relationships, it can be a defining moment to help establish relationship expectations and commitment levels to when someone wants to get engaged and so forth. There's a lot of that's why if you ever go to have Valentine's dinner, you'll actually find the dinners will be actually more expensive than they would be the day before or the day after. Same as chocolates and flowers actually lose 50% of their value after Valentine's Day. So is Valentine's Day the 14th any more special than the 15th or the 13th? That's up to you to decide. Now, global celebrations very varied, and there's some which are quite unusual. So Valentine's Day is celebrated differently across cultures. So in Japan, there's a unique custom where women give chocolate to men on February the 14th, and it's called Hanomi chocolate for romantic partners, or girl chocky for colleagues. So they actually, if they have colleagues they give a different type of chocolate. And while men reciprocate this on March the 14th, called White Day. So that's about the idea of blessing and fertility. South Korea take this further with additional celebrations on the 14th of each month, each with its own theme. Black Day on April the 14th is for singles to commiserate over black noodles. So if you ever see somebody on April the 14th and they're eating black noodles, that's because they've obviously broken up from a relationship in South Korea. In China, they celebrate the Kia X Festival, their traditional day of love, on the 7th day of the 7th lunar month, and based on a folklore tale of two lovers separated by the Milky Way. Then it goes into Denmark. Now, Denmark often exchange pressed white flowers called snowdrops, and men may send a thing called joking letters, and it's called gaverbrecht. I may have got that incorrectly, so anybody who's Danish can correct me. I think it's Gaverbrev, I think it's called. Again, it's Danish, so I'm not very Scandinavian, fluent Scandinavian, with a riddle about the sender's identity. And so from this, we can see different cultures do different things. I've heard of many different ones, but that's the most ones I can reel off and know about and researched. Now, commercial aspects and criticism. So this is one of the things I think most people don't like about Valentine's Day, is the commercialism of that. And I think it's very important to get the idea of where this goes, or where it should carry on within that. Okay, so when we're looking at commercial aspects and criticisms, it's very important to understand about this, because this seems to be always the negative about Valentine's Day. So I'm going to talk about the first one, which is economic pressure. The holiday creates significant financial pressures with expectations of expensive gifts, dining and experiences. And they reckoned as of last year, Americans are expected to spend billions on Valentine's Day celebrations. Now, if we look at the expectation, I did a video about Christmas Day and Christmas time and Halloween, and and New Year's Eve. They've all got these expectations. And I think it's a very big thing. We've got to manage these expectations of this. Number 2, artificial inflation. Now, I spoke about this earlier. Is the price for traditional Valentine's guests, flowers, chocolates, restaurant meals, often spike dramatically around February the 14th. Now, if you're struggling in a relationship, or you're struggling to maintain financial issues, is it worth overspending to prove that you love someone? Whereas actually just doing nice gestures, small gestures, could mean just as much. Again, this expectation and conditioning is very important about how we have to be careful not to have that mindset of ours altered. Social pressure, which is, again, going from this, is commercialization has created unrealistic expectations about romance and relationships, potentially causing anxiety and disappointment. For the people of fear of failure, fear of success, fear of intimacy, fear of love, and fear of commitment, these would be incredibly pressurizing with Valentine's Day. And we need to be very wary of this. And as a hypnotherapist, there's a lot of people who I haven't, not so much this year, but mainly before Valentine's Day, I used to get a lot of clients, especially when I used to do tarot readings and so forth. So many people used to say, can I have a reading on this relationship? Is this date going to go well? And people's expectations and their actual anxiety around it is massive. It's quite interesting how that happens. So we have to be able to understand our realistic goals and expectations and kind of maybe level that out. Number 4, the environmental impact. The mass production of cars, disposable decorations, and short-lived flowers has considerable environmental consequences. Now, people would say this is very negative, but it's true. Despite these criticisms, most people and couples have found ways to celebrate meaningfully while avoiding the commercial access. So creating handmade gifts and cards, planning intimate home-cooked meals instead of expensive restaurant visits. I would recommend this for most people to do, because mostly restaurants, if they're busy on Valentine's Day, I'd imagine there's going to be problems with the food, because you're getting too busy with people and the expectation is going to be quite high. So I'd imagine most staff probably don't like Valentine's Day. Neither do hotels either. Focus on shared experience rather than material gifts. So instead of doing Valentine's Day, probably do a weekend getaway, not exactly on Valentine's Day, but to celebrate it, or do a little trip, wherever that is. That's very important. And I think that can strengthen a lot of relationships for people. Celebrating on different days to avoid marked up prices, which I mentioned earlier. The marked up price is so extortionate. And it's the same as New Year's Eve. When you go out on New Year's Eve, you could pay £150 to go to a nightclub, but the nightclub usually would only cost you maybe £10, £20. It's the same with Valentine's Day. If you go to a Valentine's meal, it could cost you £100 to £200 instead of only paying like £50 usually. Again, different things, different courses for horses. Emphasizing year-round expressions of love than one commercialized day. So one thing I will say with my own parents, my parents were married 28 years before my father died. And he used to every so often give my mum one red rose, something she did once a month. Not always, not by key or obvious reasons, but he did these little things. My mum would do silly gestures, notes, post-it notes, all these things. It's all these kind of little things how we can do that. And then I think also with my father, which was very smart of him, is that actually what he did, he got married on the day after his birthday. So he'd never forget his wedding anniversary, which, knowing my father was illiterate, he had to work out things because his memory wasn't the best sometimes. And, he had to learn different things. So whether that was done by accident, but I think purposely, that's how my father got around it. So that would help. But the other thing as well is the holiday continues to evolve, with recent trends showing emphasis on self-love, friendship celebrations, which is Valentine's Day, and family inclusion moving beyond its traditional romantic couple focus. So the thing is with Valentine's Day, whatever your situation is, whether you're single, in a couple, you're longing for Valentine's Day, or whatever it is, it's just remember it is only considered to be one day. And the actual thing is would you rather just have that person be in love with you for that one day or dating on that one day to show their love, or would you like it more consistent? And I think the answer is quite obvious. Most people would like consistent showings of emotional availability and actual communication instead of just worrying on one day. So until next time, I'll speak to you soon.